on Riverside.
And you need to get ready for a world premiere coming to the new Wimbledon Theatre. It's coming to the studio. It's called Turning the Screw. And I am delighted to be joined in the studio by the writer, Kevin Kelly. Good morning to you, Kevin.
Good morning. And
also online, it's Gary Tushaw. Hello, Gary.
Good morning.
Oh, good, we've got you. That's excellent. You're never so sure when you've got a disembodied voice.
Perils of modern technology.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Kevin, first of all, what was the nugget, what was the spark of inspiration for this play?
The spark was, do all great artists need to have a flaw?
Right.
That's where it started. And can you distinguish, I shouldn't say distinguish, can you separate great art from the artist who created them? So can you look at a piece of art and say, yes, that's wonderful, even though it's imbued with the soul of someone whose behaviour you find reprehensible? That was really the starting point.
Right. So who is the great artist we're talking about?
Well, the great artist is the composer Benjamin Britten.
Right.
And I've been interested in Britten and his music since I was about 18. And with one opera in particular, The Turn of the Screw, hence Turning the Screw.
Yeah. And
The Turn of the Screw is a really spooky opera about ghosts and the loss of innocence and ambiguity. And Britten was fascinated by exactly the same novella. It's based on a novella by Henry James. He was fascinated by the story and the ambiguity in the story. And the opera that he created in 1954 is full of exactly the same ambiguity.
Okay, I think we'll bring in Benjamin Britten at this stage.
Please do.
It's actor Gary Tushaw. Gary, what did you know of Benjamin Britten before you got this role?
Well, actually, Benjamin Britten's been a rather big interest of mine for many years. I trained as an actor, but as soon as I left drama school, actually, I embarked on just a small 1-week course up in Aldborough, where Britten is from, in Suffolk, where there's the Aldborough Festival every June. When I was training to be an actor at RADA, one of my teachers had introduced me to some of his songs, and I've become very interested in him. And he's been a huge interest of mine ever since. I actually, back in 2006, Benjamin Britten, many years ago, had written an opera of A Midsummer Night's Dream, in which Puck is a spoken role. It's spoken rhythmically to the music. And I had the great pleasure of playing that role in the Britten Opera, at an opera house in Argentina, can you believe it, back in 2006. But whenever an opera of his is on, I rush along to it, really. He's a great sort of cultural icon.
My goodness, I didn't expect that much knowledge. That's very impressive. So what is the man like as written by Kevin?
Complex. The particular period we're looking at in the play is in the opera that he's writing based on this Henry James novel, The Turn of the Screw. He's writing a part for an adolescent boy. The character in the opera, his name is Miles, but he meets this chap called David Hemmings. He later became quite a well-known actor. And the play really investigates and delves into his relationship with David Hemmings, which was complex and, as Kevin said, ambiguous, where the boundaries were. He no doubt formed a huge attachment to David and David to him. And the play really investigates where those kind of creative and moral boundaries are.
And these were dangerous times, weren't they, Kevin?
They were extremely dangerous times. In 1953, you'd had the Lord Montague of Bewley case, where he'd been sent to prison along with Michael Pitt Rivers and Peter Wildblood. The Home Secretary, David Maxwell Fyfe, had ordered a clampdown on what he called well-known homosexuals. The police were routinely calling at night to see if various beds had been slept in. And Britten and Peers were living I wouldn't say quite openly, they were living together and everyone knew they were a couple, but nobody said they were a couple. And in the midst of all of this, Britten embarks on this opera about innocence and the loss of innocence and the potential corruption of a young person by one of the ghosts in the opera, Peter Quint. And as Gary rightly said, he then forms an emotional attachment with the boy that he chooses to play Miles, who was a 12-year-old choir boy at the time called David Hemmings. And David did not have a very good voice. And despite some opposition to him choosing Hemmings to play the lead, Britten insisted that he be chosen, and then started an intensive series of private lessons with Hemmings, where Hemmings came to live with Britten and Piers in Aldborough, and was there for, it's not entirely clear how long, but between 4 weeks and 2 months, being drilled daily by Britten on this brand new opera that he was writing for him.
My guests are Kevin Kelly and Gary Tushaw, and we'll talk some more after this. You're listening to Barclay's Brunch. My special guests are Kevin Kelly and Gary Tushaw, and we're talking about Turning the Screw, which is opening at the New Wimbledon Theatre in the studio very soon as part of their premiere season. Gary, who are the other characters in the play?
So the other characters in the play are Peter Piers, who was, as Kevin mentioned earlier, was Britten's long-term partner. They were in a long-term gay relationship. And it was illegal at the time that they were, the play is set in the 1950s. And Britten wrote many of his main leading roles for Peter Piers. You also got David Hemmings, the boy that we mentioned that an attachment is formed with between Britten and David. You've got Imogen Holst, who was Gustav Holst's daughter, who was Britten's assistant, really, helping him with the music. And then one final character, you've got Basil Coleman, who was the producer and director of many of Britten's operas.
And what's the tone of the play? It sounds like it's going to be quite tense.
Well, it's actually, there's a fair bit of humour there, but no doubt as the piece goes through, it's called Turning the Screw, really mirroring the original source material of Turn of the Screw. And as with that original novella, it slowly ramps and ratchets up the tension so that by the end there is quite an intense discussion and conundrum at the centre of the piece. Yeah, for sure.
So, Kevin, how did you come to be part of the premiere season at the New Wimbledon Theatre?
Well, the Ambassador Theatre Group, ATG, every year they invite applications from theatre companies with ideas for new plays. They choose 3 of those ideas, 3 of those companies, and they basically give you theatre space, rehearsal space, marketing, front of house support. And as a new writer, this is only my second play to be produced. It's extremely difficult to get a theatre to take a risk. Just trying to buy space in a theatre to put on a show. I was trying to do it for my previous show, and I was being quoted anything up to £9,000 for basically an empty room. And through the premiere season, ATG are supporting new writers and new companies, and without that support, there's no way we would have been able to put on this show. And the same with the Arts Council. The Arts Council have given us significant funding, and without their support, we wouldn't be able to put it on either. We're doing something quite big, and I'm not sure something of this scale has been seen in the studio before, so it's really exciting.
It's probably an understatement to say you were probably very chuffed when you found out that your play had been selected.
I tend not to use swear words, and my husband told me he could hear me all the way downstairs as I was doing a Miriam Margolyes.
And how are the rehearsals going?
The rehearsals have been fantastic.
Who's your director?
So our director is an absolutely fantastic director called Tim MacArthur, who I worked with on my previous play. And really, not having a theatre background, when I started writing about 10 years ago, I was advised by one of the course tutors, find a director whose work you like. And I'd seen Tim MacArthur's work. I really liked it. And Tim has a wonderful collaborative way of working, which means that the actors aren't, well, I hope Gary agrees with me, the actors aren't afraid to make suggestions. Tim is very open to them, and together we collaborate and create something that is far better than the whole is greater than the sum. It's just absolutely fantastic.
Has that been your experience, Gary?
Yes, absolutely. Tim is also Tim MacArthur is also a performer, and we worked together many years ago. And this is the first time I've worked with him in the sort of director-actor role, and it's been very collaborative, and always working on new writing. Any kind of new piece, there's an element that you're kind of organically back and forth working on the piece as you go through. That's always quite exciting, really.
Well, I'm very much looking forward to seeing it. When is it on?
Our opening night is Thursday the 20th of October. So I'm very grateful that Gary's taken time out of a very hectic rehearsal schedule to be here, because we open on Thursday.
Yeah.
We have 11 performances, and our final performance is on the Saturday the 29th of October.
And presumably you go to atgtickets.com.
ATG Tickets, and look for Turning the Screw at the Studio, New Wimbledon Theatre.
It's been a great pleasure talking to you both. That's Kevin Kelly.
Thank you for having us.
You're very welcome, Gary. And is it Tushaw or Tushaw?
Tushaw.
Tushaw. Okay. One can never be sure. Fanar.
I've heard that one a few.
It's all right. I'm called Barclay, and I get lots of references to a certain plastic card, so I'm used to it too. Thank you both, and I hope it's a huge success for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.